Okay, I think we may still have a few more to join, but good afternoon, everybody. Give us a wave. Hello out there. And thank you everyone for joining the Art of the Possible event today, How AI is Transforming Business. It's a real pleasure to be here and to host today's panel. I'm Gillian Docherty. I am the CEO of the Data Lab, and a little bit more about that later. But the series of the Art of the Possible events, they're collaborations brought to you by Glasgow City of Science and Innovation, Technology Scotland and Glasgow Life. And it's great to see these organisations coming together to run these series of events. And I guess, you know, it's great to see so many of you joining us today, but, you know, Central Scotland and indeed actually right across Scotland, you know, we are a bit of a hotbed for enabling technologies from advanced robotics and 3D printing to IoT. And obviously, as the Innovation Centre responsible for data science and AI, we think this is where it's all at. And hopefully our panel members will help share that view as well with you. So we recognise these technologies are providing exciting opportunities for cross-sector collaborations and market disruption like never before. And to make the most of them, we need to support their adoption across commercial sectors and indeed parts of the public sector to improve productivity, competitiveness of our economy as a whole. And the aim of the Art of the Possible events like today is to provide a safe and collaborative space for a whole broad spectrum of players within the innovation ecosystem to discover what is happening, to participate in dialogue and to potentially build collaborative partnerships and ongoing activity and projects beyond this. So really excited to have you all here today. But I guess, you know, technology is not on its own is not possible for creating that. It's leadership, it's knowledge exchange, adoption of potentially new business models, and each organisation's ability and readiness for change and ready to unlock the value from innovation. So you may have seen the little record button. We are recording today's session and that will be available for those who were unable to join us, and it will be shared online on the Ideas and Knowledge Exchange Network ICANN. I'm sure you'll love the next hour, which means you'll recommend it to all your friends and family that they need to go on and re-listen to this event today. But also we'll be continuing the conversation from today's event for the next session, which is on Tuesday, the 20th of October at 2 p.m. So we are also going to today we've got some brilliant panel members and we're going to hopefully have some really interesting dialogue. But I want you to get your thinking caps on around questions. We will accept questions with a hand up or indeed in the chat function. And I'll let you know when we're getting to that point in the session. But over the course of the next hour, we're going to explore how the adoption of AI within businesses can generate efficiencies, help financial resilience and drive productivity. And we're going to consider some of the wider implications of implementing artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and we'll come to a little bit of a definition of those in a moment. How to identify the new skills that you might require, how to develop new cultures and behaviours and ensure ethical practices, and that what you do with these types of technologies and indeed other technologies align with your values as an organisation. So the format of the next hour or so will be just a short introduction from me and then a conversation with our panellists for around 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your participation as the audience to ask us some really interesting and thought-provoking questions. So we're really looking forward to that section. As I'd mentioned earlier, I'm Gillian Docherty, CEO of the Data Lab. I think many of you looking at the attendee list have come across the Data Lab maybe in some form, but we are part of Scotland's Innovation Centre programme. We are the Innovation Centre responsible for data science and AI. So how do we help companies, excuse me, always happens, and organisations in Scotland innovate through the use of data science and AI technologies? And we've been working probably over the last 5 years or so across a whole variety of areas, from collaborative innovation projects, innovation funding, through to a whole range of skills and talent programs. And I'm getting really excited because we're just waiting on the results, but we hope to graduate our 500th studentship in data science or AI or machine learning in masters from our universities this summer. So that's really exciting from the studentships that Data Lab have offered, through to doctorate programs, leadership training, and then building a robust and supportive data community, not only here in Scotland, but out across the world. So that's what we do. And the team behind the Art of the Possible asked me just at the front is to explain, well, what is AI? And what's the difference between AI and machine learning and data science? And it does get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to just try and make it a little bit, just explain in as simple as terms as I can the difference between the two and the various areas. So artificial intelligence in its broadest sense is the discipline of creating intelligent machines. Okay, so think about AI as the broad term, so the kind of umbrella term. And then within that, you have machine learning. Machine learning is just a branch of AI. So you often hear a lot of people talk about, well, AI and machine learning is the same thing. Actually, machine learning is a subset of techniques, I guess, and systems that come under the broad AI bucket. And machine learning, its basic terms, refers to systems that can learn from experience. So, for example, the more images of cats that you can show, for example, a machine learning system, it gets to recognize the difference between a cat and a dog and an elephant. And then you get into areas like deep learning, and deep learning again is a branch of machine learning, and that refers to systems that learn from experience on very large data sets. And I think that is it. We're probably going to get into a few nuances, and I know that Vicky's got some things to share about who exactly is doing AI, because everyone's talking about it, and you've probably heard that joke before. But you know, it really is a big buzzword. But AI in its true sense is nothing new. I think the University of Edinburgh had degrees and research in AI going back into the 60s. So it's not a new term, but the proliferation of data and the cost of compute resource, so much more powerful computers at a much lower cost point, have made a lot of the things that have been worked on theoretically actually possible today. But at the end of the day, it's all about how is that relevant for your organisation. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Vicky Brock, a long-term friend of the Data Lab, fantastic serial entrepreneur, recently co-founded her 5th data technology company, so she really does know what she's talking about. Vistalworks, so Vicky's the CEO of Vistalworks, a consumer protection software startup. And in response to the 2018 Scottish Government Innovation Challenge, seeking technology solutions to reduce demand for illicitly traded goods online. So you're out there spotting fakes, I guess, Vicky, but we'll come back to you in a wee minute. Next up, again, long-term friend of the Data Lab and great technology company, CEO from Bellrock Technologies, Adam Brown. So welcome, Adam. Adam's co-founder and CEO of Bellrock Technologies. They're a high-tech software company providing expertise through their software technology platform Lumen, making it quicker, easier and more affordable for companies to introduce decision support and advanced data analytics. So welcome, Adam. And our third panel member is Kenny Kong. Hi, Kenny.
Oh, hello.
Kenny is a platform engineer at JP Morgan Chase, but has got a long background, a mathematical and physics graduate, and then obtained his doctorate. He moved into data-oriented AI approaches for cancer detection, so really interesting field there, and is now a platform engineer at JP Morgan. So welcome, Kenny, and we've got 3 great panelists there that are going to, I guess, help. So Vicky, I'm going to come to you first, because you and I have chatted about this a long time. How do you get started? You know, these terms, you know, your CEO comes to you and say, I want a bit of that AI stuff. How do we do that? So how would you share that with our audience today?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the biggest barrier is how to start. And, you know, like with anything, you can't try and boil the ocean or do this in abstract. I mean, I think the place to start is where you would with any other business challenge. What's the business case? You know, why does our client, our business model, our team, our growth need this? Where does it fit in? And actually, I always, perhaps because I'm lazy, but more because I'm realistic, I always look at any business challenge in terms of what's the least amount of work I can do to make a measurable difference. And actually, if you can break something down to how little work do I have to do for this to be good enough to make a measurable difference in the business, that gives you a really clear kind of sense of the urgency of the pain or the problem. And I, personally, again, I think everything I do, any innovation I do, however I choose to solve it, it's about the pain and the problem, not about the methodology. I really need to understand the pain and the problem, the urgency in the business case. Only then do I worry about how to solve it. Because it may not be an AI problem. It may be a data problem. It may be a data analytics problem. And I think kind of the data function in a business, we don't do it a good service if we make it sound too complicated and bundle it up as AI. I think, these days, data function in a business is like people. Like it's like people and HR. It's like finance and accounting. This is a really core piece of business. You kind of start somewhere, start anywhere, do something and grow into it.
Great. Yeah, and Adam, I guess, you work with a whole range of organisations, and I bet you've probably answered that question a number of times. Where are they starting? How do you get started?
I think Vicky's kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think a lot of the times it is looking for that obvious business case where you are going to gain value quickly. And it's not just from the point of view of getting started, it's also from the point of view of bringing people along with you in that process. Because if you're going to be successful, particularly in large corporates, there's often, probably quite rightly, quite a lot of skepticism out there. Having seen projects in the past that have failed and maybe not gone as far as they could or not made the impact that they could. So it's about finding the business cases that can really help people, I think, in their jobs, make their lives easier and give them a benefit out of it. And then making sure that those early stage use cases are actually brought through to fruition. And we've seen countless projects over the years that have been successful proof of concepts, but then not translated into real systems and real solutions that actually benefit people. And because of that, then skepticism can build up. So I think it's really important to just look for those early stage use cases that actually you're going to fully implement and you're going to see value from.
And Kenny, I guess coming to you as a real practitioner in this space,
yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your view in terms of the work cycle of AI?
Yes. Because you can see the intelligence is just work like a human. You have to collect the information, so you have to make a way to collect your data correctly to cover all the information. And the secondly, you have to store how you store the data and how you retrieve the data. And then lastly is how you learn anything from the data. So that's a free cycle. Yeah, so normally in some process, okay, a company will come with it. Okay, I got a very historical data, a large chunk of it, but they want to make a system. However, they never realize they need to make something. Okay, if I need to upgrade, where should I upgrade? And if I want to make a software update, and then where should I start? So all these things. So I see this is so once you get started, like Vicky said, then you have to think about, okay, how to collect the information and how to store the information, how to learn it, and what software you want to use and what hardware you want to implement on to make it one cheaper, and how you recycle back to the, okay, if something missing, how I collect the missing information. Yes, it's a cycle thing. Yes, it's something non-stop. But following this, you can make your AI much better.
Okay, and I guess thinking about that cycle and I guess the data and the technology areas, I think there's a lot of projects that we've kind of seen and been involved in where it's much more than just, I guess, the data and the processes, Vicky. And I wondered if you could maybe highlight some of the key factors that can accelerate a culture of AI adoption, whether that's practices, skills, team, the culture itself of the organisation, the innovation appetite. What do you think those key factors are, and how would you recommend organisations kind of approach them or prioritise them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you touched on something super important there, Kenny and Gillian, and that the data tends to come before the data scientist. I hear so many data scientists who are approached to, you know, people trying to find data scientists and they have no data, or, you know, so I guess my answer to that is like, where am I looking for readiness in innovation is that, yeah, I actually have already got data or identified my sources of data, and I have a data-driven project. And I know that sounds so startlingly obvious that I feel a little silly saying it, but I'm saying it because I hear so many data scientists and so many people approaching data projects and AI projects thinking that the data team will solve the problem of magically finding the data which they analyze. I look at an AI-shaped innovation or an AI-shaped solution that I'm going to be building as having probably for me, three core components to it. It's going to number one is it's going to very quickly become bigger than humanly manageable. So this is going to have scale. You know, you could argue that tracking COVID tests in Excel is probably a project that is bigger than humanly manageable scale and probably should have been AI rather than Excel. But like literally number one, if this is going to relatively quickly grow bigger than humanly manageable, as in bigger than 400,000 rows in Excel, bigger than one person sitting doing this for their full-time job, then I need to think about AI. Also, it is mind-crushingly repetitive. There is a lot of stuff that basically is not efficient to having the same person doing something every single day with a set of scripts. If this is the way it's going to go, then again, I want to do this as AI, probably machine learning, but not necessarily. So this element of repetition is something that goes to me like, okay, wherever we take this solution, you know, I'm seeing these characteristics come through that suggest to me this is going to be an AI computational solution. And the final piece is complexity. And this is the one for me where you kind of grow into it. I can perhaps skip complexity just on day one. Maybe I can skip complexity in year one. Not giving any clues away there, but when I get to the point that I need to do multi-language, as in multi-spoken language text analysis, which is what I'm doing now, multi-currency, multi-language, multi-platform pricing analysis, understanding the text in an image or the currency in an image, the level of complexity in that is just so far beyond human scale that again, I know I need AI. I don't need it all at once. You know, I started with this is always going to be bigger than humanly manageable. So I started with databases that could cope with it. And now I'm getting to the place in, okay, I need specialist data scientists who've done, you know, image text analysis algorithms. That's a very niche thing. And I would never have had that on day one.
Great. So it's about breaking it down then, and I guess Adam, to you, you know, the companies that you work with, how do you help them break it down when you're working with them into, I guess, achievable activities and results as you go through it? It's not a kind of you squirrel away for 12 months or 18 months and come out and go, ta-da! It's much more iterative than that, isn't it?
It is really. And again, you know, not to be a broken record, but it comes back to what are they trying to achieve? What questions are they trying to answer? And I think working with them, particularly with larger companies, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but some of whom don't have the level of experience around AI and data science and what's possible, it's helping them to understand what is possible. The title of this talk, The Art of the Possible. Quite often it's sitting with companies and working through their challenges at a business level, and helping them to understand based on the data that they hold or the expertise that they hold within the company. And quite often that comes before the data, I would say. So working with them to understand, based on what they want to achieve as a business, what could they do? What could the priority list look like? And then getting into those small turnaround, quick turnaround projects that can actually deliver value and deliver real solutions as quickly as possible. I mean, just to come back to the point that you were asking Vicky as well, I think there's probably three key things that cropped up in my mind there when you were asking about what really drives success. I think for the companies we've worked with, what we've seen is that one of the first ones is making sure that there's buy-in at the top of the organization and a real drive at the top, not just to say, we've got data, we better find value in it, but an understanding as well of where data could be more effectively used, where AI could be more effectively used. And then as you start to break that down and organizations get into it, I think it's really important to have quite multi-skilled teams and avoid silos, but particularly to involve the end users. And part of that is going back to what I said before, but bringing people along, sit with you and gaining confidence and showing people that actually there are opportunities here. There are not necessarily so much of the risks that can sometimes be understood. Then once you're doing that, I think it's really important for the organizations to deliver extremely consistently. So try to avoid silos, try to avoid different teams or skunk works running off, doing their own thing, and 5 different competing solutions coming back to the end users. Try to actually find a way as an organization to deliver stuff really consistently and deliver it as quickly as possible so that your users are always seeing the benefits.
And I guess as you start to get into projects in this space, Kenny, I was going to ask you, your experience obviously in using AI in cancer detection, you know, a really worthwhile project and cause and no doubt very challenging. What are the barriers that you've seen in AI projects, and how would you suggest that we start to overcome them?
Well, there's a few things. First, the data. So you have to collect a lot of data. The second is how you to learn from data. Okay, supposingly, I move to one step later. So supposingly the data scientists, they make a very good model, but then you have to think about the platform you want to deploy. So you want to deploy your model in just a local computer or in a cloud, or if you are in a low power platform, for example, automotive. So you have to think about, I got a model, how I write the mathematical model in an FPGA, that will take a lot of manpower to implement that correctly. So I see the challenge will be, so once you got the data, so you have to think about, where to deploy and how much you would be willing to pay to maintain the deployment. And and then have to be then have to think about if I would like to upgrade, what's the best architecture of the AI system to make it easier to upgrade and maintainable. So this question is it will come afterwards. So once you collect your data, create a good model, then you still have a plenty of problem behind. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess Vicky, you know, probably two things. One is the barriers that you've seen, and that was great to hear from Kenny there. But also, you know, you hit those barriers. Who do you ask for help? How, when, and from whom do you get support or advice or learnings? So what are those barriers, and who can help you?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the barriers that I hit in a previous business. So as an entrepreneur, my technology is what my companies have been creating. So each time I've been making a tech product. In a previous business, because my own background is data analytics, I over-invested, over-expanded, over-hired and overbuilt my data and data science team way ahead of the capability of the business to do anything with that. So we actually were coming up with like really cool insights, really great models that did not connect to our core tech and could not connect to our core tech. And actually it was a really difficult situation to get out of. And ultimately, I really did only personally solve it by going, hey, I'll never do that again. And, moving on to companies 4 and 5. But, you know, we did then kind of have to turn around and get help and look at experienced businesses that were a few years ahead of us, looking people that had, you know, talking obviously with Data Lab and people like that, but also through the Scottish Enterprise Networks, through the wider ecosystem, going and talking to companies that were a few years ahead of us and that were broadly in the same space to try to get a sense of how they'd solve those problems. Yeah, we definitely, made the big mistake of building ourselves into a silo with data science and AI living here and technology living there. This business, I have done that completely differently. They are the same thing. We are all the same team. And I've, you know, been grateful for a lot of support from just looking at things like this. You know, how have other people solved this problem? What do I need to make sure I never do again? There is a lot of learning out there. It's just, unfortunately, it's rare that you need to know. It's rare you understand what you're screwing up until you're in the middle of screwing it up.
Okay, and I guess the same thing to you, Adam. Barriers, and where do you go and get some help?
So, well, barriers for us is pretty close to our heart. I mean, it's really the reason we set up Bellrock, because although we're a business dealing in AI and data, the thing that we're really trying to help companies with is actually deploying data science models and advanced analytics so that they can use them. And I think it's, as Kenny touched on, it's a part of that process of the data science cycle, which is quite often very overlooked and underestimated. And I think, you know, for us, what we're looking to do is use AI actually to improve that process and make it simpler for firms. But there's huge amounts of barriers from, you know, just in your large organization, you can be dealing with multiple data systems, legacy systems, data coming from lots of sources, cultural divides, silos in terms of people and tech. There's a huge number of barriers that can stop businesses actually moving forward and rolling out solutions. In terms of where you can turn to solve that, well, I mean, I think it is important that firms go and try and talk to people and specialists who have been there and done it and experienced the challenges that Vicky just spoke about. I mean, there's obviously yourselves, Gillian, without wanting to name check too much at Data Lab, but lots of firms and agencies out there who have been there before and have experienced these challenges and overcome them in the past and know some of the tricks of the trade to be able to actually get past some of these common challenges that are holding back rollout and deployment of solutions and actually getting these things into business and into the hands of users.
Great. I guess, Kenny, from your perspective, I'm gonna come now to some of the questions that have been pre-submitted. So this is your cue, audience. Get ready with your hands after this one. But I'm gonna pick on one of the areas, and again, it's in the space of help. Kenny, having spent a lot of your years at university and yes, gaining your PhD, yes, how do you think universities might help stimulate the creation of AI startups and developing AI technologies that can support teaching and learning across Scotland?
Well, first, university is a very good place to start because many study, so you can first, there's a lot of open source data set for you to try out, which is licensed to educational only. So the student nowadays, they can easily to access those data sets to want to do something on it. For example, MRI data set is already publicly available for students. So if they want to start off their own data, so they got data already, they just need to pre-process it and write a good algorithm to learn from it, then they can get a good model out of it. So that's an open source. The secondary is that normally the university will come up with a university hospital. So they already have a very good collaboration. So you will very easier to get the ethical approval to get some real data from the real patient. That you get an advantage on this. So once you get the ethical approval, then you can start to collect the data and then you manage it correctly according to the ethics. Then yes, then it's a good way to start for medical AI in medical in university. Yes.
Great, thanks for that, Kenny. And
Yeah,
our first hand, Poonam, we're going to come to you. Fantastic. Good to see you again.
Hi, Gillian. Good to see you as well. Yeah, fantastic discussion, and lovely to hear from Vicky, Adam, and Kenny. So I am going to be probably just shaking the nest as I probably ought to, and ask the obvious question. Some of you would have seen the Nesta report, and Gillian, you were a fellow commentator on that. So in Scotland, the public trust is quite low in the technology, and I would say fairly so with the COVID happening. In terms of job losses, people are thinking, why do we need machine doing human job? And while you three have made a fantastic case of what the benefits are, and it's beyond human, but that is a challenge. So one question is, how do we build that trust where people start to see that it's not competing with humans? And the second question will be more Kenny specific. So if time allows, I'll ask a healthcare question.
Okay, so Vicky, do you want to have a?
Oh yeah, yeah. The building trust, and I think one of the other questions that was submitted in advance is quite similar. You know, from my answer perspective anyway, which is about the risks. I think the biggest risk and the biggest destroyer of trust around AI is this whole concept of computer says no. And
David Williams should be said.
Yeah, right. So this is the worst aspect, biggest risk, you know, biggest destroyer of trust is that we kind of assume that somehow the computer during doing the AI is doing something different, above what we can conceive of or understand. Therefore, whatever the computer says is right. And now I kind of think most of the big concerns around trust, around ethics, all fall out of this. You know, the computational analysis of any kind is only as good as what A, the data set, and B, what we tell it to do, and how we supervise it and understand what it's doing. I personally think there has to be an awful lot more transparency about why the answer that something generates is generated. You know, we have deliberately chosen to keep a log of every single result that any query through our system generates, so that we can unpick any query of any check on any product and go, why did we get that answer? Now, keeping that log costs us an awful lot of disk space, which costs us an awful lot of money. But I need the whole organization, both ethically and operationally, to understand the outcomes that we're achieving. And if we can't go back and understand a result, how on earth will anybody trust what we do? And I think, you know, there's a lot of casual, it's far too much, you know, it's far too much to store this stuff and go back and have a human check it. No, there's very little, if anything, we are comfortable enough to step back and go, right, this is ready to run completely unsupervised. There will be no human eye ever going on this again. But that is, I think that's quite unusual, but I honestly think supervision, ethics, transparency, and trust and risk just all go together.
Yeah, great, Vicky. And Poonam, what's your second question to Kenny?
So,
yeah, so I think leading on to that.
Hello.
Oh, I think we've lost Poonam.
Bounds, but there's.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah. If you could start again.
Okay. Right. Okay. So I think moving is following on from that human supervision that Vicky was talking about.
Yes.
So during the COVID time, that while our NHS has moved leaps and bounds in terms of digital transformation, I think the challenges of healthcare, and especially in terms of genomics data or the cancer genome that it can tell us, is a lot.
Yes.
But machines will be learning, as you said, and in terms of the larger the data size and the patient. But on the same theme, there will be that initial stages and how much trust we put in the clinician to check before something is approved, whether it's the diagnostics or outcome. But there is another aspect of people handling or sort of having the confidence of their data, that because there is a commercial aspect of it with the insurance companies, and where do you draw the line, and how do you make sure that patient agrees to do it for the research and diagnostic purpose, but not to be benefited or disadvantaged down the line to say if I have a genetic predisposition.
Yes. I think you could look for phases. It's called explainable AI, currently is developing. So what happens is, if I got a black box model, it works really well. If I say the sensitivity 99%, specificity 95% above, even though I make this model available for the hospital surgeons, they still not trusting it. They are just, okay, you got that. So first thing you need to do, you have to get it explainable. Explainable, you mean the either you move away from a complex model, so using a simpler model, and then you make a while you make decision, you have maybe have some other submodule. Okay, because I see these features in the cancer cell. Yeah, well, if I see this feature in the cell, okay, I have quite up 99% confident it's a cancer cell. So you can see that features. Okay, so it's just some explainable. So you can explain to the surgeon, because human, when they see, look at the X-ray slides, they got their own mind to say, I see this, see this feature, then I make a decision. In machine learning models, sometimes that's not happening. They can be very complex. So yeah, I think explainable AI is the next move. So it's a combination of simple model, knowledge graph, to make things, you can make the user, okay, they can, when they visualize it, they know exactly why the computer make that decision, then they get more trust on it. The secondary is you have to get something is over a long time to build a trust. So something, okay, you got a gold standard of the histopathologist, and then your machine for 6 months already, and they have some kind of correlation of agreement for a while. Then people, okay, then they will start slowly to build a trust to trust your device. When the histopathologist is not there, then from your device, what the device say, okay, they say, okay, because according to their experience of trust, it is their some kind of correlation, then they would trust it. Yes. Yeah.
Great, thanks Kenny. So explainable AI, simpler models, and over time building trust. So Garry Bernstein, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Gillian, and thank you very much to all the contributors. What a great session, really pragmatic, sound advice. We're blessed today to have our AI experts, but they're also leaders of their own companies. And I've got a question context of, as consumers and clients, we're seeking to do business with companies we trust. So it's building on the point that I made as well. And wearing your hat as a business leader, where do you see where AI helps your corporate governance and maybe hinders you as well? So corporate governance and the role for AI to do a better job there, how does that fit?
So Adam, I think you look pensive there, so you're getting the question.
That's fine, Gillian, no problem at all. Hi Garry, how you doing? I mean, it's quite a difficult one to answer, simply because it's not really an area we have used AI. You know, a little bit like as Vicky was talking about earlier, we are a technology company developing an AI product. So we obviously think about how we deploy that product and how that affects the way we run our company. But I wouldn't say particularly we are using AI within the corporate governance of the company or anything like that. So it's, yeah, for me, it's quite a difficult one to really get under the skin of, I think.
What about you, Vicky, and your experience?
I think there's definitely, you know, tools and products both in my life as a consumer and a business that are utilizing AI components or very heavily. And, you know, if Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft touch your life, then you are touching AI in some way, shape or form, many ways, shape or forms. And I think my big concern as a business is who, and as an individual, right? Who is doing what with my data? How are they storing it? How are they securing it? And who, more importantly, are they selling it to without my consent? And, you know, I'm actually like a huge believer in data regulation, because I think, you know, the risk where we as businesses, our own reputations are in danger of being trashed is if somebody who I paid to store my data thinks it's perfectly acceptable to give that, share that, sell that to another company that they own without my consent, which, you know, I'm so far down the food chain that it's me that gets destroyed in that, not them. And that is my big worry. And, you know, I'm not going to say the B word. I said at the beginning I won't get to the B word, but, you know, I am happy right now that we are in an environment where we have very high levels of, at least in theory, data protection legislation. And it would make me very sad to see all that eroded, because I think you then get to the problems that Poonam's talking about. Well, what about if the scans that the doctors are looking at are now being sold to insurance companies? You have to have trust in your policy, your regulation, in your governments, I think, for that not to happen.
Okay, thanks, Adam and Vicky. Just looking for any other hands up. I'm flicking through the screen. Otherwise, I'll come back to a question that I've got pre-submitted. Okay, so one of the, I guess the pre-submitted questions is, do you think AI in business could result in a lower standard of product, redefining less significant understanding of the creative thought and process? So that's a bit of a thought-provoking one. So just again, could it result in a lower standard of product by redefining the less significant understanding of the creative thought process? So Kenny, do you want to have a go at that one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. Because as long, well, according to machine learning, so that's one way, supervised learning. So you can learn whatever your data set should be. So as long if your job is repetitive and just repetitive, and then you have a lot of data, and then whoever the human label the data, then will be that the machine, the AI model will be almost exactly the same level as the labeler, whoever do the labeling. So yeah. First, that's why I don't think. And the secondly, it is the loads, and also because we can do some path searching. So if you want to make, for example, the best, the AI at the chip, to how to rearrange your IC in your chip, so the computer chips, the pattern arrangement, I think it is likely to using AI to do some path finding will be a lot better than normal design product. Well, that's how I see this. So as long as you got enough data, whoever to make the model will be just whoever the quality it is.
Yeah, so whoever's making the model and defining that, that's where the creative element is, and the model just complies with that.
Yes.
Yep.
Gillian, if I can just
Adam,
come in
sure.
quickly, I think it comes back to actually a couple of points that Kenny and Vicky have made earlier in the presentation. So Kenny mentioned, for instance, the model that he's trained that's 99.5% accurate, I think you said, Kenny, and doctors would still say, oh, but, well, essentially what they're saying is, what about the 0.5%? But as Vicky said previously, this is not about replacing what we currently do with an AI solution and forgetting everything else we've done in the past. It's about looking for opportunities where AI can enable and support and develop what we already do. And I think if you look at it in terms of we're going to use AI to replace people, or we're going to replace current processes, and it's the all singing, all dancing solution, we're never going to get there, because it will never be fully trustworthy, or well, it's a long way off. There will always be instances where it gets it wrong, same as humans get it wrong. And what we've got to look for here is opportunities where AI could work alongside humans, their existing knowledge, their existing processes, and actually complement jobs, complement processes, and help people. So if I take, and it slightly touches on Poonam's question from earlier on, the companies we've worked with who are embedding models for improved decision support and greater insights to their teams, they're not doing that with a view to then saying, well, let's sack half our team. They're actually saying, our experts are currently incredibly busy wading through data and trying to find answers. Now, can we use AI and models and data to give them the insights that they need so that they can actually do their job? And then we can use them more productively. Then we can analyze data as it comes in and take decisions as things happen, rather than 6 months retrospectively. So I think for me, it's not about looking at AI as something that's going to completely change how things are built and therefore produce a better or a worse product. It's actually looking at how you can use it alongside what we currently do to enhance what we currently do.
Yeah. And I guess, you work in a lot of regulated industries, Adam, and energy and nuclear and various things. So I guess that element of kind of regulation and trust and the importance of these things being extraordinarily robust, if you can imagine, in those types of sectors. When you move to other sectors that maybe are not as regulated and as toughly as measured as tough as those industries, what do you think? What's the level of AI regulation, and what's your view on kind of broad AI regulation? Whether we want it, we need it, how much, how little?
I think when you talk about AI regulation, that's like trying to regulate oxygen. It's such a big thing. It's such a big scope that for me, again, it comes back to what are we doing with it? And Poonam mentioned earlier about specific patient data, specific patient records. Then we're getting into ethics of when should we collect data, what data should we collect. That's the type of thing where I think there's certainly some scope for regulation and looking at how we go about these things. AI generally, I don't see how you could start to regulate AI, because it's like regulating any other subject matter, and I'm not quite sure how you would go about that. So for me, it's about the way you would regulate anything else. It's how do you regulate the challenges or the problems that we're trying to tackle, and let's look for the ones that are important to regulate. But trying to regulate a whole subject scope, I think, could be really difficult.
Yeah. So Poonam, do you have your hand up again, or is that from earlier?
Sorry, no, it's just Adam's point about that AI itself can't be regulatable, that started a thought process. I was just wondering, how intelligent is an intelligent machine? When do you draw the line and say, yes, now the machine is actually quite intelligent? Because humans, we do go through the training process and have various matrices and certification. So in AI, how far are we that to start designing that this machine is ready and really intelligent? Is there anything on the horizon?
It ties into that other question a little bit as well, about the question about creativity and can AI create lower standard products? Absolutely. Left to its own devices, it will create terrible products as well as occasionally a good one. But I don't know if anybody's come across any of the music or the stories that they're starting to use AI to generate this. I mean, they're like extraordinarily weird. The music is actually a little bit better than the writing, but it's very different. It is not replication of human intelligence. It's a very, very different process. And I truly, like Adam said, we would be very, very foolish as a society and as a planet if we, outsourced creativity to AI. It would be very weird.
Yeah, and actually going back to Poonam's question there, for us, I think again, it's maybe not about how smart is the machine, when do you hit that trigger point. It's probably when are you going to start using that in your business or in your organization or as a society as a whole to take a decision or to take control. So when do you feel comfortable that actually you want to let the machine take over, if you like? At that point, I think you then need to get into the questions of, is this smart enough? Is this accurate enough? But I wouldn't necessarily come at it from the other way of, have I got smart enough yet to do this? It's almost thinking about, you know, the importance level and the impact level. So as an example, we work with EDF Energy, who operate the UK's nuclear reactors. We are using AI to support their decision-making process and give them greater insight from their data, but they're never going to take a human out of the loop in terms of deciding what to do next. Now, there's other systems that would do that. So for instance, in the financial industry, you might have systems that are starting to automatically detect the likelihood of fraud on transactions, in which case, well, actually you're flagging things. You get a page full of transactions that may be fraudulent. If one isn't, actually, it's not the worst thing in the world. You're already narrowing down the search for the people who then need to get in touch with the customers. If it isn't a fraudulent transaction, great, move on. But actually, I think it's about the impact. So that's not a case of the machine stepping in and starting to automatically take a decision and run off and do things. For me, then it's about that impact.
So one of the things, on you go, Kenny.
So I think as some additional comment after that. So you can see the self-driving car currently is just you got a very good self-driving cars currently still at the level 2 automation. You still need a driver behind the wheel. So even though it's driving itself, but you still have to be behind the wheel to, okay, anything happen, you have to take over. So it will take a while to get it up to level 5, which is a fully automated. So when that level 5, so it means the car don't have any driver, so it will make decision itself. Then people, whoever are working with it or surrounding with it, have to trust it. Once it reach level 5. So I think currently it's like using AI is like the stage is a level 2. So computer make a decision, but you monitor it, then you can gain the confidence from there. Okay.
Great, thanks, Kenny. And I guess one of the things that I find frustrating, particularly around trust, is when we hear terms like it was the mutant algorithm that did it. Let's just say algorithms don't mutate themselves. They don't become mutant like a turtle. They are guided by the people who create them and the boundaries and guiding rails that the algorithms built to do. So it's back to Kenny's point, you know, you're training the model, the person who's training the model is determining that. And I don't think that helps generally with the public. And I'm going to just come back as we close off the call to Scotland's AI strategy. But I guess one of the, you know, we've talked, you know, at the start, some of the amazing things that Vicky, Kenny and Adam have been involved in and are currently doing. And, you know, you will always get into a conversation around ethics and trust and debate. Absolutely, it should be. But what I'm going to ask each of the panelists just to close off, either from their own experience or from their awareness of the market, what's the best use of AI that you've ever seen? That's excited you, you know, and I'm going to come to Kenny first, because actually some of my favourites are in that space of healthcare. So what's your favourite one you've ever heard of?
Favorite actually is not from healthcare. I'm making my personal hobby is making my own CCTV system. So mainly using deep learning to detect certain, actually the postman come, my dog's in the garden. Actually, there's a widely available model that I can download, but then I just need to focus in the hardware. The hardware I deploy on, so how to unload the model to my hardware, which is a Raspberry Pi plus something else to get it run. So yeah, so actually, because that one, I trust it. And also, even if you make a mistake, it won't affect me a lot. I won't get my damage, but I can enhance my home security system. So using deep learning to look at the video, and whenever people come, you raise alarm. Yeah, actually, everyone can do it. Now it's all the codes are properly available as long as you can just implement correctly. You've got a hardware to run it, and yeah, that's my favorite.
That's your one. Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know, Kenny, you're not going to lose your dog. That's excellent. So Adam, what's your favourite that you've either been involved in or you've heard of?
I'm struggling to think of a specific favourite, but I think, I mean, you touched upon it there, Gillian. I think anything around the healthcare sector where we're helping people, and we're helping to diagnose or predict issues that people may have in their lives going forward. Those are the ones that really get me excited. I mean, I can think of, my wife works in ultrasound imaging, and you know, it's a very manual job where she is very trained in picking out patterns and so on and so forth. But you do look at that and think, well, you know, again, not to remove the operator, but there'd be so much support that you could give people in those type of settings to actually, you know, get the data analysed quicker and faster, and help them take really key decisions that can affect people's lives. So for me, it's stuff like that that's the really exciting areas. Yeah,
and Poonam's just put one in the chat around X-ray radiographs and eye disease detection, so thank you very much, Poonam, for that one. Vicky, what's your favourite?
I think some of the stuff that has impressed me to the extent that I have noticed it and gone, oh wow, that shows that there's been a big leap forward, is it's probably around some kind of, like, some of the computer vision stuff. I recently opened a new kind of online bank account, and I did the whole identity verification thing by I got to take a picture of myself, picture of something else, give a voice sample, and it was able to stitch all of those things together in a completely automated and very fast process. And I was kind of looking at it and trying to unpick how many different processes must have gone on that. But I think it definitely represented a really interesting step forward around computer vision and image recognition and processing. I mean, there's probably scary implications to that, but that identity management and the efficiency of opening an account just really impressed me.
Brilliant.
And that's so much more professional than, I really like the way Instagram knows that because I like sloths, I probably also like otters.
Well, there we go. I didn't know that was a correlation that the algorithm has found out. So sloths and otters, there we go. That's something to take away from this afternoon's call. But just before you all go, I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware that there's an ongoing piece of work around Scotland's AI strategy. It was kicked off by Scottish Government earlier this year. And there's been a number of kind of public consultations, public engagement work, steering boards and working groups contributing to the thinking. So please go and check it. There's a whole pile of assets and reports and information on the website. I've put a link in the chat for anyone. And indeed, just in the last week or two, they've published all of the public consultation reports. And I just thought it would be really good just to share, to close off today's call. These are the kind of 5 key issues emerging from that consultation that is now being worked on by the government for launch in early 2021, which will be Scotland's AI strategy. So firstly, the need for an ethical approach, perhaps presented as a code, framework, or a set of principles to guide the development and adoption and use of AI in Scotland. Secondly, the value of making the strategy people-centred and aligned with Scotland's national performance framework. Third, the need to provide skills and training so that all people in Scotland can understand, engage with, and use AI in a way appropriate to their needs. Fourth key issue is the value of case studies of AI having been developed and used responsibly to deliver benefit, and for these to be easily explainable. Kenny made that point earlier about explainable AI.
Very important.
Absolutely. And finally, the need for a continuing public dialogue on AI in Scotland to ensure that our approach is and remains fair and inclusive. And it's great to be involved in dialogue like this today. I hope you've really enjoyed it. That it has been recorded, so if you've enjoyed it and you want to pass it on, please do so. And the next event is Tuesday the 20th of October in the series of The Art of the Possible. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Gillian. Please give a huge virtual applause or applause on your screen with a little icon to Vicky, Adam and Kenny, our panel contributors this afternoon. Thanks for joining and have a great Wednesday afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.